Welcome to another episode of the Next Chapter podcast. I'm really excited to be um, here today with Abby. Abby and I are fellow Midwesterners. We went to the same camp, we went to the same university, Go Blue, and we are also sorority sisters. So, welcome, Abby, to the Next Chapter community.
Andrea, it's so great to see you again. It's just amazing to see you live, like not live, but on the camera, because you look exactly the same, just as wonderful as I
Oh,
remember. So,
likewise. Thank you. Yeah, it's fun because Abby and I actually, we are still connected through Facebook. Abby happens to be a year younger than me, but I appreciate when I posted that I was looking for guests for the podcast and other mothers to kind of share their journey with the community. Abby reached out and wanted to be able to share her journey, inspire other mothers. So I appreciate that.
so happy to do that. I love to share my story and hope that whether it's something about motherhood or owning your own business, that I can give someone some inspiration.
Well, so let's start before the business, before motherhood. Let's go back to Abby as a child. And I like to start kind of in the beginning of who Abby was as a child and what you kind of dreamed of doing.
Yeah, so I never knew what I wanted to do as a kid, which was really hard for me because I have a sister and a brother. And like my sister came out of the womb knowing she wanted to be a doctor. And my brother always wanted to be a teacher. Like there was no question. And like I remember my parents like, we'll support you. What do you want to do? And I just never really knew, but I loved creative things. I loved to sit and draw or color or paint. I loved going outside. I loved nature. So I just never knew. But then in my family, there was a lot of pressure just to, go to Michigan, get into a great school. It was like, go to school and become, if you don't want to be a doctor, be a lawyer or be an accountant or some type of professional. And I really did feel like I never fit in like a perfect box of any of these career paths. So I ended up at Michigan and I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I really liked psychology. I took a psych class. It was fun. Well, yeah, okay, I'll just major in that. So I majored in psych, and senior year of college, I needed like a blow off class. And so I looked for something. I'm like, what's easy? I was just done, I'm like, what's easy? And I'm like, oh, botany. And it has a 3-credit lab where you get to go to a greenhouse. That sounds fun. So I signed up and I took this botany class and I absolutely fell in love with it. Like I was at the greenhouse all the time. We got to do all these cool experiments. My first 3.5 years at Michigan, I didn't even know we had a greenhouse.
Neither
Okay.
did I.
Like, yeah, it's on North Campus. So you would never know. Like I had to take a bus to get there. Finally found someone who could drive me in my class, but like it's way out there, but it's amazing. And so I was really excited about that. But at that point, I had already, been committed in my psychology journey. So long story short, I did get a job. Not I knew I didn't want to like be a therapist or anything, so I did get a job. I worked for Eli Lilly for a long time, and I started off my pharmaceutical sales career selling psych drugs. So it did kind of go hand in hand, but it never was super fulfilling. I still felt like I was putting myself in this box. Like I have to go get this job because that's what you do when you're done with college. You go get a corporate job or something. So that's kind of takes you up till my first career, let's say.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's really hard when you feel, the pressure to kind of choose this traditional path. And I think that that is something that a lot of women, mothers, we can all relate to, that, you're focused on this path, but there's just something that doesn't feel right. And it's interesting how it took you your senior year to find that class that really kind of sparked that creative interest in you. So,
Absolutely. And I joke, people ask when I sold my first plant was that year I came home on spring break and I brought all these plants that I had grown. And my parents were moving out of my childhood home and they had a garage sale. And I came home and I'm like, where are all my plants? They had sold my plants. Like I had all these
that's
plants that
cool.
that I had brought home. I'm like, what happened to all my plants? I had like this aloe, all these plants, and they're like, oh, I guess they got sold. So it was meant to be, but it took me like another 20 some years to figure out, plants was something that made me happy and I could make a career out of.
Which we will certainly talk about. And I appreciate you saying that it made you happy and a career, because so many times I think you can find that kind of um, balance between what will bring you joy and your actual career. And then other times you're doing your work, you might enjoy it, but that's not where your true passion lies. So, can you kind of talk about your first kind of career and how that kind of played out?
Sure. I was in pharmaceutical sales for almost 20 years, which is just crazy for me to think about. I would say it was a great career, especially at the beginning. As a working mom, it did offer more flexibility because I didn't have, like, before working from home was a thing, I was working from home, right? I set my own schedule. I mean, within the parameters of working these hours, and there was a lot of responsibility, but I was sitting at home or driving through my territory. I think part of it was easy for a long time and it was financially rewarding. So I kept with it for, I think, longer than maybe I should have. Another thing that happened is I just felt, and this will get into more of the motherhood, a lot of times I felt while I was at work, I was worrying about things at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I need to make doctor's appointments for the kids. This kid needs me to pick this up at Target. So mentally, a lot of times I felt my mind wasn't there. Conversely, when I was at home, I'd be thinking about work, right? Like I'd
Right.
be there at night at dinner being like, oh, I have this presentation tomorrow, I have this and this, and it really got stressful for me. um, but it was manageable, right? But I always knew like something was missing. Like if someone needed something creative on my team, they would come to me like, oh, Abby, we need a logo for this internal contest. Or do you have any ideas? Like, so I loved that kind of stuff. So I tried to do the stuff I like within the conformity of what I had. Now, being in such a highly regulated industry was, you can't do anything creative, right? Everything has to be approved by the FDA. Every meeting with a doctor has to, this, and this, I have to show them. So it was really tough. So I tried to find those outlets. For a while, I was a sales trainer. So that kind of helped a little bit. We did like a March Madness for sales training. And I did like all the logo and we did a Kahoot and we had teams, sales teams competing against each other. So I tried to bring, but I loved doing stuff like that. And I was like, man, I've got to find something that's going to fulfill this creative spark and just be my why. A lot of times, especially at Lilly, they had a big thing when we did sales and they were good about training and professional development. Being a large company, they did have a lot of resources, but they'd be like, what's your why? What's your why? And I was like, that question's so annoying. My why is because I need a job. I have 4 kids. Like I need some money and this fits okay. Right. So I didn't understand that. And now that I do something that I truly love, literally, I have I get that question now. Like I understand because I have a why. I get up every morning because and maybe make sales calls or do something for the business because my why is really important to me now. I want to make, gardening and plants more accessible to people. So
It's really interesting how you had that awareness that something just wasn't working. And again, I appreciate how you said that at the moment your why was you needed to make money, and this is what you thought. This is what you thought was what you had to do, that you go to work, you had a great, you had a career, you had a company that was supporting you, and you were able to make some money doing it. And there were parts of it sounds like that you enjoyed, but there was also that, the lack of creativity. I also really appreciate how you were able to find moments and outlets where you were able to express your creativity and what you were doing.
absolutely.
So I wanted to back up because I know that this kind of plays into also how you transitioned motherhood. So you are I think you wrote, you shared with me that you are a mother of triplets plus one. So
Yes.
how did the motherhood piece play into you working as a sales rep?
Absolutely. So yeah, I have triplets. When I do something, I go all in, right? So I got thrown into motherhood times three. And so that became really challenging. Surprisingly, so the triplets, when they were little, work was a little bit of a relief. Like I considered staying home, but and not that there's anything wrong with staying home with your children, but for me, I do feel like as a mom, that's a full-time job, but I also wanted something else, some type of career, some type of business. The triplets, it gave me kind of an outlet to go be myself and not just the triplets mom for a while. Where things got really fuzzy was that extra baby, that plus one. So when my kids were 9 years old, like the triplets were finally like in upper elementary school, they're dressing themselves, they're wiping their own butts, they're more self-sufficient. I had a surprise pregnancy. And so that really threw a wrench into things that were easygoing. And people don't believe me. And I have a friend who always used to say, like when the kids were young and we'd go somewhere, people ask, do you have kids? She's like, I'm never going to sound that impressive because I've got Abby next to me being like, oh, I have triplets and everyone wants to hear about that. But I will tell you, having experienced the motherhood of triplets and the motherhood of a singleton, in some ways, having triplets was easier. And I don't mean because the job is easier, it's times three. I mean the support. So when I had triplets, the company bent over backwards, right? I'm in a medical condition. They literally at 20 weeks pregnant were like, stop working, or they basically made work I could do part-time from home. They bent over backwards. Everything was easy. I had the triplets. At that time had a full maternity leave plus medical benefits, things that a lot of women in this country, unfortunately, don't have. But the community support of a mom of triplets, my husband's office, literally every day he went into work, there'd be a meal for us in the refrigerator with directions that he took home and we have dinner. Like I didn't have to worry about dinner for me and him for months. Some of our favorite recipes we use to this day were from people. Neighbors I never met before would like knock on my door and be like, do you need help? Friends of friends' parents would leave boxes of diapers on my door or meals or gift cards. I mean, the community, I really felt like I had a village. So when I had River 9 years later, I'm like, oh, I can do one baby. This is easy. And that's when like stuff came crashing down because it was like, where's the line of people bringing me diapers, offering to hold this child? I still have these triplets and now I have one
Right.
more to add in, right? So I didn't realize honestly that there wasn't, when you just have a baby, the world doesn't stop, right? When you have triplets, it kind of does. Like people are really impressed. They want to see what they can do to help. So going back to kind of the original question, it was I love being a mom. It was super challenging, but even more. And that's when I realized after I had River, um, that I just wanted, especially because he was my laugh, a little more time to be home with him and savor everything. And since I have less help, I needed to be around more. And I still have these triplets. And, the older they get, the problems, they're different problems, but you still need to be around, even
Right.
more so sometimes, I think. So,
No, it's interesting because support system is something that I talk about a lot with my clients. And when they want to do something either in the home, outside of the home, that it's so important to be able to ask for the support you need, ask for the help that you need. And it's
so
interesting
hard.
though, how, like you said, when there's triplets, it's like, oh, wow, she's going to need
Everyone
all this
wanted to
extra
see.
support. We want to see them. But everyone needs support, even if it's, when it's one as well, because there's a lot that goes into being a mother. And there's a lot that goes into, as you said, I think earlier in the conversation, that, you're not just the triplets mom, but that you're Abby also. And so, in order to be able to shine as Abby, it's important to be able to build that support system. And I know that you had mentioned in a previous conversation kind of your idea of work life balance versus work life integration. And I think that that is a very important distinction and something that I talk about a lot between balance, but I appreciate, kind of the integration piece. So, can you kind of share a little bit about your definition of like kind of work life balance for like integration and how that's kind of played out in your path.
Absolutely. So, we hear the term work-life balance a lot, especially earlier in my career. That was a big buzzword. And like I said, I worked for a large company that had a ton of support. So we had optional things we could listen to, we had women in work support group, actually started a moms of multiple groups. So we had a ton of support, but it was always about work-life balance. And like, I just got to the point, especially after baby number 4, that that wasn't working for me, right? Like I said earlier, I'd spend time at work thinking about home thinking about work. I'm missing out on things at school, but then our team goes out to dinner on a Friday night for team building or something. I feel like I need to be home. It just wasn't working for me. And for me now, owning my own business, I can integrate things a lot more. So like we talk about, as the kids get bigger, you're driving them all over the place. So like, if I drop a kid off and then I have to drive home, what a great time for me to listen to Andrea's podcast, right? And
Thanks
improve
for
myself and
plugging
what.
it.
Gotcha there. Um, Also, like I'll listen to education stuff on plants. Like I'm in the plant business, so I'll just listen to a podcast about plants. Using that time, I'm sitting there at lacrosse practice. My daughter's on the high school lacrosse team, so like she doesn't, when they're little, I want to pay attention and watch. But I'm sitting there, and it doesn't make sense for me to go home because it's such a drive. So I've got 45 minutes. I'm on my phone or on my computer doing social media, returning customer phone calls or emails. So for me, I get to be, I guess the best way for me to explain it is before I felt like from 8 to 5, I'm an employee. And then from 5 to 8, I'm a mom. Now I get to be an employee 100% of the time. And I get to be a mom 100% of the time. And sometimes because for me, my life didn't work that way. I couldn't be at work and it just didn't shut off. Some people that works great for, right? I have friends, I have my sister, my cousin, they like that. Like they go to work there. My sister goes to work. She's a doctor. I couldn't do that. Like it just didn't work for my personality. So yeah, I feel this integration where you can kind of be 100% both, and kind of flip it off and on. And something we haven't gotten into too much is I have ADHD as well. So that works really well for me, is getting stuff done right away. Like at the beginning of the podcast, I talked, I need to make the triplets a doctor's appointment. So in the past, I'd be at work all day thinking, okay, when I get home or later, I need to do that, or at my lunch break or whatever. Now I just do it right away. Like
Right.
before you forget, I make a list at the beginning of the day of 2 things I have to accomplish today for work. And if there's anything I have to accomplish, like making doctor's appointments, and I just do them at the beginning, just get them done with, get them done with. So it kind of went off on a tangent there, but that work-life integration
No,
model is something to consider.
that is definitely something to consider. And then also, I want to speak more about kind of leaning towards your strengths. And that is important, knowing that what works for you, you're the one that needs to make things tick. You're the one that needs to keep the car moving forward, keep the family, afloat and all of that. And if you are fighting against how you operate, it's really tricky. And so to be able to, like you said, kind of integrate things in a way that feels comfortable to you really makes sense. So can you kind of share, speaking to a little bit more about leaning into your strengths, but stepping back, at what point did you feel that you were kind of misaligned?
Um,
Like really
I
misaligned
felt,
and you switched to
yeah, I think it
adding
really
sorority.
so COVID, that was a big wake up call for everyone. I think I was making things work before my job changed a little bit during COVID, right? So I was used to at least being out all day. So with the ADHD, like sales was a great job for me. I was seeing, 7, 8 doctors a day. So it was great. Every day was different. I wasn't sitting at a desk. I knew that wasn't going to work for me. But when COVID happened and I was sitting at a desk, we're trying to make virtual calls. We're still trying to do stuff. The job I had during COVID, I had moved out of psych drugs. I was selling heart medication in the cardiac cath lab, and all of a sudden we're locked out. And I just sat there one day and I'm like, this is so miserable. This is just not what I signed up for. My job has changed. I never really felt that satisfied by it anyways, but something's got to give, right? So
Yeah.
that's what really made me notice is I again was forcing myself to sit right where I'm sitting right now from 8 to 5 every day, following up with it. Just wasn't this isn't for me. It's not working. Like you're exactly right. It's not working with, that's not my strength. That's some people's strength. It's not mine.
Right.
So I think you have to really be self-aware or
For
become more
sure.
self-aware.
Self awareness is huge. So that's one part of the piece, for sure. And it sounds like you had that. But then there's also, you could be self aware and then you can continue to be in that same position and wake up every day miserable and continue to fight it. Or you can make the change. So, what kind of inside of you, or how are you able to make that change? Because that's something that's really hard for people is change.
It was the hardest. Honestly, leaving my job was the hardest part. Now, I did start my business, I did both for a short amount of time. I guess I'll tell you a little bit about how my business started.
Yeah.
So, I own a business called Abby's Garden Parties, and we do DIY terrarium building events in the Indianapolis area. We do have online kits for sale as well. But I had this idea. My daughter, during COVID, wanted a plant. She wanted a terrarium to match the vibe of her room. She was redecorating it for the 100th time. So knowing I love plants, we went out, we picked out some plants, then we went to the craft store, we picked out some accessories, and she was a tween at the time. We came home, we sat at the kitchen table, and her and I just sat there and built it. And like we were both like, that was really fun. And like we felt like we bonded, like we just like relaxed.
Yeah.
And we were just doing something creative and fun. And I say it now at garden, the best conversations happen while you're gardening. You're busy with your hands, you're involved in that, but it leads to having a great connection. So I thought, how can I bring this feeling to other people? Like I want to recreate this. And what happened was, I was like, I'm not opening a store. Like, that's just not me. But like, what if we just did this as a party? And like, literally, it was like meant to be. My neighbor, like, literally the next day was like, I'm supposed to have a birthday party for my daughter, a swim party outside, and it's supposed to rain. And I was like, I have this idea. Are you open to it? And that was our first garden party. It was 11
Love
girls
it.
down the street. I wheeled everything down and I've learned a lot from that, but that's how it started. So I did it part time, and that obviously 4 kids, a side gig and a full time was not sufficient. And I finally came to my husband and I said, if I really want to give this a go, and I feel in my heart that I have to give it 100%, like I'm going to have to leave my job. So I'm super lucky, amazing that my husband was super supportive, and he still is like my number one fan. He's amazing and super helpful. And so he's like, yeah, let's do it. So we planned, and we took about 6 months savings and put that aside for it. And I'm like, I'm all in. Like if you're going to do it, but that was seriously the scariest step.
For sure.
Like I had this idea, but leaving the golden handcuffs or the regular paycheck and really taking that risk. I mean, I had panic attacks. Like I knew I had to do it, but I was like, oh my God, am I risking like my family's livelihood? I have 4 mouths to feed. I mean, my husband works, but in today's, environment, with most people needing 2 incomes, it was scary. But I will say, you just got to try it. I was like, that's my option. I'm going to look back 20 years from now and be like, what if I had really had the guts to do this? And I'm like, and if I do it and it doesn't work out, like I can go back to pharmaceutical sales. I don't want to ever. I love what I'm doing. So take that. That is a scary part. Change is always scary. But I'm so glad I did it.
Well, there's so much that I want to highlight, and just the trying something. And as you mentioned, you could always go back. You could take a different path. While you said you don't want to go back to pharmaceutical sales, but there's always another door to open. And I think that's where the scariest part is. It's just opening that door and having the courage inside of you and knowing that you have the tools that you need to try something. And if, like you mentioned, it didn't work, then you open up a new door. So that is really huge, that once you can get that over that fear of not having the confidence in yourself or whatever it is, that there's such beauty on the other side. Like, look, you said that you found something that makes you feel creative, allows you to feel relaxed. And it sounds like this is what really plays into your strengths. And then the next thing I wanted to say is that how it started kind of slowly, that you were doing this a little bit on the side to be able to test the waters. And then when you asked your neighbor and said, like, let me try this out, and that you were able to kind of do like a test market and saw it. So
Mhm.
that also is really important to highlight too, because when people aren't sure, they have an idea, they're not sure, but test it, share it with the world and see what happens.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. I found a lot of people through my plant community. There's a lot of female owned businesses, small businesses in the plant arena. So finding those people, like I know today, if I, for some reason, stop doing this, like I have so many connections now, I could get a job in, my industry that I like a little better now in any of those facets. So it really, when you are doing something you love and you learn that industry, you explore a little more, and it's been a great experience.
For sure. And then how does this allow you to feel more aligned with what your kind of strengths are? Because you mentioned,
Oh my God.
having ADHD, and that's, I appreciate that you're sharing that, and that when you live now in alignment with something that you can do, how has that changed kind of your life?
Absolutely. So it's funny. So I sold an ADHD medication even at one point at Lilly. So I've had a lot of education on ADHD. I have a degree in psychology, my undergraduate degree. I sold Strattera for a while. Like I know so much about ADHD, but it wasn't until my own child was diagnosed that I saw in myself so many, like in him, so many characteristics of what I do. It was a little bit like looking in a mirror and seeing behaviors that I
Yep.
do. And here I'm trying to coach him through it. Last night was a perfect example. He had some friends over this weekend and they made a mess in the basement. So my husband said, Brandon, you got to clean up the basement. And he said, I'm busy right now. He was doing nothing. It was Sunday
Right.
afternoon. And Sam said, well, it's like 5. Could you clean it up by 8 o'clock? And Brandon said, yeah. And I was like, hmm. So, and then I heard my husband say at 7 to him, like, have you cleaned the basement? And Brandon's like, no. And I was like, you can't do that to someone with ADHD, because if you give someone 3 hours to do something with ADHD, they are not going to be motivated till the very last minute. And sure enough, at 7:45, he's throwing everything together, he just waited 3 hours doing nothing. But like that was one thing, like with ADHD, you have to have really motivation to do something like that, like a deadline, because it's that thrill kind of being close to the deadline that motivates us, I think.
Yeah.
So so much of watching him struggle and trying to help him with things helped me. And it really helped me realize, like, okay, I'm trying, like, to do something that doesn't fit. Like when we talk about a career with him, we're going to try to find something that would fit. And really, I always say ADHD is a superpower.
For sure.
People get that diagnosis and they think, it really is. It makes you so unique. Think I tell Brandon all the time, like, if we were living in caves, you'd be the most important person in the tribe, right? Because you'd have new ideas. You'd always be looking for something. Everyone's in a meeting and you're looking out and you see a lion on the hill. It is such a superpower because of how we live today. It's not a deficit, right? So you have to find a way to align that. And so much of what I saw by helping him, I helped myself. I'm like, I'm not aligned. I'm not using my gifts properly. So
I
that's
think
how
it's a
it kind of.
message to everybody, though, that you need to live in alignment with your values, with your gifts, with your strengths. And when you're not, that's, I think, where you feel that kind of either internal or external friction where, you feel you're like a little bit on edge and things like that. So it's
And you
very
have to know, like, it's unique having triplets because I get to see 3 people with just such different personalities
important.
in the exact same environment. So, we bring them home from the hospital, we're treating them all the same. And I remember going to the pediatrician and being like, I don't understand. They all drink the same formula. This one poops 4 times a day, right? And this one poops once every 4 days. And he's like, Abby, they're different people. Stop treating them the same. And that
Right.
really just hit me, right? So Alex, I never have to tell Alex to do his homework, right? He is straight A's. He does it. You don't even know he does it, right? That's his personality. He will make a great corporate employee someday or working in a typical. Where Brandon, we're encouraging him he's got an interest in photography, to really explore that. So every individual is different. And even if they have the same, even as a parent, right? You think I'm doing this wrong, I'm doing this. the kids are the kids. Like you've just got to adapt to how different they are. And seeing them all at the same age with three, we feed them all the same. They live in the same home. They have the same access to everything, and just how different they are and how their interests are different. And I can't put them all in the same box, right? I'm not going to shove them all in the same little, you've got to go here, you've got to do this, you've got to get this degree. That's not how we're going to do it. Because I did that for a long time. And there were a lot of years I was unhappy with my job. So
Right. Well, and now it's interesting how we learn from our own experiences and then we transfer, what we've learned to our children. And sometimes it's making those changes and focusing on Abby. What does self-care look like to you? Because I think that that's important to kind of highlight. First, how do you define it? And then what does self-care look like?
self-care is making sure I have time for myself. There is always something to do. Okay. There is always something in my house that's a mess. There's always something in my business that needs to be done or could be done. Right. But I learned this from my husband because men have no problem doing this. Right. He's like, during COVID, he's like, I'm going to sign up every Thursday to take a 2-hour online guitar class. And like, there was no guilt. There was no like, he's like, just from 8 to 10 on Thursdays. And he loves it. And it's I see now it's such an important part for him to like unwind. So I was like, I want 2 hours a week. I don't want to sign up for a class, but I just want 2 hours a week to sit in my office with my plants and fart around. So that's what I do. So he's got, Thursday nights, I got Wednesday nights from 8 to 10. Like he takes care of bedtime and like that's mommy's time. So for me, it's not as much about like going to a spa, I know, or that kind of stuff, like getting my nails done or anything like that. It's really about having time for myself, that I have no commitments, that it's just about Abby and what Abby feels like doing. Because I think I put pressure on myself to be productive, right? Like 2 hours, I could be emailing a customer. I could be cleaning out the kid's closet, right? And I would literally feel guilty for taking time for myself. And that was bad. Like during COVID, it was just bad. So really just scheduling 2 hours for yourself to do whatever the hell you want. And maybe it does mean that I'm going to go to Home Depot by my house and walk around and look at plants for 2 hours. So in terms of the actual activity, usually it's just going and looking at plants. I have a couple plant friends, I call them. They're like, we just have bonded over plants through the plant community. Like last Friday, I went with one. We just went to a random nursery and walked around and bought stuff we didn't need. But that was like so fun for me. So find your thing, but make sure you give yourself the freedom and the amount. Like I schedule it literally on my calendar, 2 hours of Abby fart around time.
I
Because that's
love
how I
that.
recharge my batteries, right?
100%. We need to recharge our batteries. And like you said, there's always something else that you could be doing with that time. But it is so important to take a pause, to do something that is important to you. And like you said, for some people, it might be getting them nails, massage, whatever. That's why I always like to ask people to kind of define it, because everyone has a little bit of a different definition. But the idea is really to stop, relax, recharge, and give back to yourself. Because as they say, if you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you're not going to be able to serve the others in your community. So you need
Absolutely.
that
And I think
reminder.
as mothers and parents, it's so important. I think not to lose that sense of self, right? Because there was a time where I was like a Lily sales rep, the mom of triplets, Sam's wife. And I'm like, it really did feel probably about 10 years ago, like who's Abby anymore, right? So I think it is important to have your own hobbies that are not ones you share with your spouse or your children, and have your own little group for doing those kind of things. And that's separate from like my plant friends are separate from like my girlfriends that we might go out to dinner once a month and things like that. These are just people that enjoy this hobby with me, and we share, and we might text each other pictures of plants finds. And that just brings me so much joy.
That is nice, because I think that is literally the name of my program is This Is Me. Like, who are you? We end up putting on all these hats or all these blankets or all these layers as we, our mothers and like you said, business owners or whatever it is that we're doing, and we forget who we are at the core. And that can be really scary, because you're going through life and you feel as though there's just something missing. Well, what's missing is your connection to yourself and what brings you joy. So I am so happy that you have found that. And two other questions. First is for families, what is a plant that you think families could kind of nurture together and do something together? So what would be
Absolutely. So I
our
love talking about plants. It's so great to get your kids involved in plant care. Two of my kids really like plants. The other two could care less, right? So it's a super fun hobby for an easy plant. I always tell people their first house plant should be a snake plant. So those are those big long ones with the thick leaves. You water them once a month. They're really hard to kill. Once you have success with that, that's a great house plant. But also just like even at a big box store, go buy a succulent. Like they're so easy. They're $5 investment. If it dies, it's not the end of the world. But if it lives, it is so fun and so powerful. And if it blooms, the thing about plants is it's kind of like an easier version of a pet, right? You get to care for something, you can see it change and grow, but there's not that commitment and it's not going to need, you can leave the house. You don't have to clean
right?
up any poop. After 4 kids, I'm like, I don't want anything where I have to clean up poop. That's like my rule. I've cleaned enough in my life. So, um, just go and get like an Echevera is like that basic rosette looking succulent. Your big box store is going to have them, for a few bucks. The other thing I encourage, and we did this with a bunch of people last year, and my son, my youngest, like start seeds with your kids. So get like, even if you just get a packet of herbs in one of those little trays. River and I did that one day this week. I got little popsicle sticks. So we practiced his writing. He wrote the names of the plants and we stuck them in. And last night, some of them had sprouted. We checked on them. Beans are super easy for an outdoor vegetable and they grow really quickly. So I always tell people, go get a bag of beans. It sounds silly, like Jack and the Beanstalk. Throw them in a patch of soil somewhere, and they grow so fast. And then they'll grow up in like little ropes. You can get like a little thing for them to grow on, a trellis, and then you pick beans. So love doing gardening with your family. It's a really fun project.
It's something that, like you said, you can nurture something together. What I do want to ask though is if you do have pets, are the ones that you mentioned, are they pet safe?
They are, but you do have to be careful. So everything we carry at Abby's garden parties, I make sure that it's not toxic to dogs or cats or people because I just don't want to be in that situation. Like I just did a party at a preschool. And they had to have me like give certification that nothing was poisonous because it was going to be in the classroom. Everything you carry, there are a couple popular plants that are poisonous to animals. So you just always want to check. You can do a quick Google. The ASPA website is a great one. If you Google, is this plant poisonous? Most of them aren't poisonous or toxic enough. They would probably just upset your cat or dog's stomach. But you always want to be careful. And there are a couple popular varieties that can be toxic. So Mother of Thousands is one I see a lot. It's a really cool plant. It's actually toxic to kids too. So we always want to be careful because dogs, cats are attracted to plants. We have a joke in the Perry family. My brother is 6'4", and we had a potted plant in our house growing up, and my brother used to eat the dirt. So we always joke he got so tall from that. He'd just crawl over and get in it all the time. But don't eat your plants. They don't taste good, and it's not good for you. So you always want to double check that nothing's poisonous.
That's so funny.
But
So
the snake plant is not poisonous. It's a
um,
great one.
and maybe I'll have to go. My daughter's off from school today, so maybe we'll take a trip
Nice.
to
Yeah.
the
Take a little trip.
greenhouse and add that to
So
our
fun.
As we kind of near the end of the conversation, I always like to ask the guests to share either one kind of tip that the listeners can walk away with, or a lesson that you learned that you think that another mother should be able to follow. So, what would your tip or lesson be for our listeners?
I'll give you the one thing I remind myself about, and this is more about being a business owner, but it can apply to being a parent, I guess, is it's based off of a Steve Jobs quote, but sometimes, especially with entrepreneurship, sometimes saying no to a lot of good ideas is okay, right? So we don't have to say yes to everything. I have 20, and maybe this is the ADHD. I have like 10,000 new business ideas a day, right? Like, oh, maybe we should add this to the Turian bar. And I literally have to be like blinders, focus on what your business does best. Like you're talking about plants. I'm like, I would love to come and consult you on all your plants, but and I will, but I had to remind myself, focus. Sometimes being successful means saying no to a million good ideas. And I think that does apply for, sometimes I have a hard time saying no to my kids. Like my one son, he's Alex, he's my straight A student and he's a good kid. He doesn't ask for a lot, but he wants to go rock climbing all the time. And sometimes it's just really freaking inconvenient to take him. And I feel bad saying no. And it's a good idea to go. It's exercise. He has fun. He has friends there. But sometimes I just have to say no because me taking you there and then going back in an hour to pick you up is 45 minutes out of my day. And today I just don't have time for that. So focus on what you need to do. And it's okay to say no to a million ideas. That's something I struggle with. I'm the first person to say yes to like any crazy. If you have a crazy idea, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do that. Where my husband's really good about like, bring it back, Abby. Like, I'm like, oh, so-and-so said we should go to this, and let's do it. So sometimes saying no, practice saying no.
I love that. That is something that I talk all the time about. It's the idea of setting boundaries, because when you say yes to something, you're obviously saying no to the time that you could be spent on something else. And that might be the thing that brings you joy, but you have that guilt of saying no. But then who are you really saying no to? Yourself, a lot of times, because you don't have that time back to do it on the things that you said. So yes, I love that. Boundaries
Absolutely.
are so important, and it is sometimes hard to live by. But if you can keep that reminder in, that is so important. I will add in the show notes where everyone can get in touch with you. And I
Awesome.
appreciate you sharing, and hopefully that the listeners can definitely find some comfort and support in the things that you're sharing and learn from your journey. So thank you so much, Abby, for being a part of our community.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.